There's a reality and then there's a fantasy. And the problem that we have today is we don't have a media that is bold enough to call out politicians that just simply come out and lie. So let me tell you some absolute truths that you can actually go ahead and research on your own, because the data, the math is absolute. This isn't somebody just talking. The math is absolute. The economy rated by GDP always since the 20th century done better under Democrats than Republicans. That's number one. That's a statement of fact. The debt always gets better in the aggregate under Democrats than under Republicans. And that's not by accident. And that isn't, well, because it's an exception. No, it's a fact, but it goes based on ideology. The Republican ideology is that of cutting taxes and the claim of limited government and all of that sort of stuff. But the reality is that cutting taxes only work for rich people, and it's only a small percentage of Americans that are rich. So therefore, they cut these taxes for all these rich people, but at the same time, they cannot cut the programs to cover those tax cuts, because those programs cover the average middle class and lower class, working class and poor Americans. So they just leave those alone. They do nothing about it, but they get their taxes cut. So in effect, they have a fiscally irresponsible methodology. The Republican Party, the Republican politicians do. They have to be careful how they cut the programs, because it affects not just liberals and progressives and Democrats, it also affects their own. So they leave it standing. And by definition, that means if you're going to cut taxes, if you're going to give all your money to the defense industrial complex, and and you're not going to cut the social programs or the defense programs, then you get huge deficits. When Democrats come into town, they look at the books and they say, oh my God, the only way to pay this is using math. And math says you have to raise taxes to do XYZs, etc. And they raise taxes, and generally the budget gets better. The deficit gets lower. Obama lowered the deficits. Biden lowered the deficits. I mean, it's still high as hell, but he lowered it. Was less than it was before. It is important to understand why that is the exact opposite of what Donald Trump did in his first term. And what he's doing in the second time. He's spending more, all with Doge, with the Doge hype and firing all these people. Guess what, folks? They're still spending more money than under the Biden administration. So I want you to understand there are lies. And I want you to also understand that the media doesn't do enough to let Americans understand that they are being played with this thing about the Republicans are good for the economy, or that the Republicans are good for fiscal responsibility. All of those are just talking points, but lies. Go to all these different government agencies and find out that what I've just said is factual. So please, if you're a MAGA person listening and you have been taken up by the liberals are big spenders and liberals are fiscally responsible and the responsible ones are Republicans, etc., understand why Republicans are not responsible, because it's tax cuts, but they can't really do a lot of cutting to the social programs. Otherwise, they'll never get elected. They just blow the budget. Now, how does that tie into what Howard had to say with bonds? What that means is that we get a lot of people to buy bonds. And who buy bonds? Speaking in the aggregate now, rich people buy the government bonds, and also foreign countries park their money in United States bonds, because the United States always pays its bill, and that interest rates that you're getting on those bonds, you're guaranteed to get it. You know why? Because all of us as taxpayers, that's the first bill we pay. The taxes due on all the bonds that we sell to cover our deficits. The interest on the amount of money, the trillions of dollars that we owe, that other foreign countries own in bonds and our rich people own in bonds. As soon as we pay our taxes, we give away $1 trillion in interest to pay those rich folks and all those countries that have bonds. So let's give an example. China has about, let's just call it to estimate, let's just call it $900 billion in bonds. It's a little bit less. That means every single year we give China for that $900 billion, about $30 billion in our taxes. We just write a check for $30 billion and give it to China. So much for hating China, so much for, controlling China. China don't give us any money for any loans, but we, because they're owning our debt, we give them $30 billion. And the same with Japan. Japan owned 1.0 something trillion dollars in our debt. So we pay Japan every year 30 something billion dollars and growing of our taxpayer dollars right off the top. That's $30 billion that can't go into healthcare. That's, but altogether, it's $1 trillion that we owe to all the countries that own U.S. treasuries, plus all the rich people in America that owns treasuries. That means own our debt. But I want to show you the evil within that way of doing business. In general, we won't cut social programs because we can't cut social programs because, again, they are required. Social Security is written, but Donald Trump is going to try using all kinds of tricks to screw us. The rich finance a lot of these folks. We always promise the rich these tax cuts. What that means is the following, folks, and I want you guys to understand how we as a people are conned by the wealthy. Every time we decide to lower taxes, that means the wealthy gets to keep more of the money that we worked for. Because remember, the wealthy gets their money from the excess labor that we provide. In other words, when you go ahead and buy all those goods that they import from China and they mark it up by 500%, the workers get a tiny little bit and they get most of the money from that markup on that product or on that service. They get most of the profit, the bonuses, all of that. Now, they don't want to pay the same tax rate that you do on that humongous amount of money that they make. So their benefactors, their politicians, the people they own, go ahead and they say, okay, we'll give you a tax cut so you don't have to pay the taxes. All right, that's one way the wealthy makes money. They get the tax cut. But here's the evil part. To get that tax cut, the politicians borrow the money to fund the government, to fund your military, to fund your Social Security, to fund your Medicaid, to fund your SNAP, to fund the roads, to fund all of that. To complete, they have to borrow money. And who do they borrow the money from? The rich people. So the rich people got a tax cut. They take that tax cut, loan it back to us, we the people, and then they tell us for loaning us that money, we have to give them interest every year. And that is that $1 trillion that we pay in interest every year. So they get money from the tax cut. They get monies from the borrowing that we do from them and having to pay them interest on that. But it gets even deeper because we as a society, their monies are generally owned in several financial instruments, either stocks or bonds. So we pay them to use the money which is really the tax cuts that we gave them. So they give us back that money as loans, and then we pay them from the honor of using that money. But it gets deeper. And then they convince their politicians that, by the way, those stocks that they own, when they decide to sell that stock, guess what? At that point, that stock doesn't get taxed at the same rate as your income middle class folks. They pay a discount in taxes on the appreciation of the stock when they sell that stock. When you make your money from your wages, you pay the full amount in taxes, but they don't. So that's another way that they get over on us with that. Now, how is this stuff of selling bonds that Howard talked about create a further problem? If we have Japan, China, and these other countries selling bonds, that means that the price of that bond they're selling falls, right? Why? Because you're asking somebody to pay something that isn't matured yet. And the way the bond mechanism works, they're selling it because they see an issue with the country that owns the bonds. And what that means is to cover that bond. And since we need to borrow more money, because if they were just selling that bond, it would be fine. But they're selling that bond into a bond market that we, American people, are also borrowing money from. So anybody who wants to buy bonds, before they buy the new bonds that we're selling, they will go buy those bonds from Japan and China, American bonds from Japan and China, that Japan and China, to get them sold, have to sell at a discount, which means if it's earning 3% or whatever, they have to sell that bond at a discount to make that offer good to the people who want to buy it. And what that means, if we want to sell new bonds, new debt that's coming on board, we have to raise the price of interest more so than the bonds these guys are trying to unload. So therefore, if we have to pay, I think it went from like an average of like 3% to the last time we saw it was 4.4%. Every percentage increase in that bond makes the deficit much worse, because that means we have to give away that much more money for people to hold our debt. And who's ready for that higher interest rate? The rich people are going to say, come on, keep deficit spending. We'll buy those bonds at those higher interest rates. It makes it even a better deal. I speak about the con and rich people. Everybody talk about we shouldn't be supporting class warfare and all of that. Hell no, we should be supporting class warfare. Hell, that's why I wrote a book called As I See It. Class warfare is the only resort to right-wing doom. They tell us don't play class warfare, but they sure as hell are playing class warfare on us. That's why the farmer has to buy his seeds every year instead of using his own seeds, because when your field get genetically modified by the pollen flying in the air and Monsanto sues you, you are in deep caca. Everything in this country right now is made to support the wealth of the few. Folks, I need you to understand these things. You're not hearing this on mainstream media because these are corporate medias, and these are the systems that hold the rich, that hold those the way they are. Most Americans, they go to work every day. They have to pay the bills every day. They have to do all these things every day. So they don't have time to research all this stuff. They don't. And moreover, you have easy information coming from Fox News, lying to them day in, day out. You have marginal information coming from the mainstream media, not letting them understand the fraud that is our economic system, that you can't get ahead. The only way you get ahead is if you are invited into the system. And 10% of the people are invited into the system. 20% of the people are invited by that 10%, and the rest of you fight for the next paycheck. Everybody think we are a meritocracy. They're fighting DEI. Well, remember the caller who spoke about MEI, meritocracy, excellence, and intelligence? DEI is the only thing that guarantees meritocracy, intelligence, and excellence. Why? Pete Hegseth, that is what non-DEI does for you. You get people like Pete Hegseth in power. When you have DEI, everybody has to follow the same rules of excellence, of intellect, of intelligence to get in. It just means the door is open for everybody. In our economic system, the door isn't open for everybody. It is open for those who are invited. There are a whole lot of engineers that UT and A&M and Texas Southern and all these universities put out there. You have to be invited in to get in those good engineering jobs, whether you're good or bad. I remember when I got on NASA, I saw the engineers, we all work together, we all sit down so we could all understand our different competencies. And when DEI isn't enforced, when these other signals aren't enforced, I can tell you categorically, the good old boy system is active and I've left NASA a long, long time ago, but the good old boy system is involved. The people that you're doing the work are the people that you think least. And then the people that are loafers out there are just who you think would be loafers. So let me tell you, folks, the system is rigged. It's not a meritocracy. It gives the impression that it's a meritocracy. Oh, if I work hard, I can do stuff. Look, you can open your pizza shop and do well. You can open a grocery store and do well. Not get rich. Do well. Some people may stumble into wealth. But let's look at what Donald Trump is doing with tariffs right now. The tariffs right now is going to help a lot of rich people. Even as they complain, they will never lose. But the mom and pop store in Timbuktu, South Dakota, that imports all those baskets that it decorates. I did an interview where we have this guy that anybody to listen to this guy would look at this guy and say, this is a good, solid Republican, but he owns a glass company. And this glass company used to make the glass here in the United States. For competitive reasons, he had to make the glass pieces in China, but he still employs a lot of Americans by saying, I am going to bring the labor into the United States, these glass bottles or glass containers, bottles that I can get for cheap, but I will make sure that the decorations and all the customization is done by high-skilled workers here in the United States. So he hires a lot of people in the United States. What is Trump's tariff going to do to him? He's also in a federation against these tariffs. What is this going to do to him? Prices from China has a 145% duty on it. He said, Egberto, I ordered my product 6 months ago. They're sitting on the docks. I have to pay 145% to bring those products in. What that means is the product that I sold for $15, I'm going to have to sell now for $25. What that means is less people are going to buy this product and I'm going to have to lay off American workers. So all of you MAGA folks that are looking at the genius of Trump, you know what I mean? The ignorance of Trump, really. These things affect people and it affects the small business person. It affects you, MAGA, more than anybody else. And you listen to all the rhetoric on Fox News and Newsmax and all these other places and have a fish hook in your nose as you follow these people. Brothers and sisters, come on, wake up and tell your congressman to do the right thing. We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead. Number 1, subscribe to our channel. And number 2, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.